Hey there, General Matthews.
How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Good afternoon,
Yeah, good afternoon. I
or
just
the very end of good morning, right?
that is true. You're right on the cusp.
I'm opening up the session now so that people can actually start to enter in. Uh,
Okay.
that way, right at noon, we'll kind of be ready to go as I kind of welcome people and let them come in now and go through some of the administrative announcements at the beginning to not take up too much of our time.
Okay. Yep.
All right, so people are coming into the session now, and we can see that that people are actually joining. And we know that in the middle of the workday, it sometimes takes just a few minutes for people to get a chance to join. So welcome everybody. You're in the right place. Welcome to Isaka, South Florida's part two, specifically dedicated question and answer session with General Matthews. We're glad to have you here, and thanks for joining. So we're going to allow just another minute or so as people are coming into the session and as we're getting everything ready to go.
Well, thank you again, Rob, for the nice welcome and a return visit back to this esteemed body. So I'm happy I didn't screw it up too bad the last time.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, as a matter of fact, for those of us, for those who were here in the last session, they'll remember that we actually had more questions than time, and a lot of people with a lot of, in my opinion, very good and interesting questions. So that's why we were so excited to have you back this time,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
why such a great opportunity.
As I tell my wife, I've never met an audience I didn't like. They may not like me, but I like them.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, we like you very much around these parts, and now we're also proud to call you South Floridian as well. So welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you so much. I tell you what, it was just a long year trying to get here with COVID, and but we are really happy, and we're in the throes now. That's why I have my artificial background up because there's all this painting going on around around me. Things are in a disarray, so it is what it is. Happy to be here.
Absolutely, we know the drill. And since it's just about 2 minutes away, I'm going to go ahead and actually kind of get into some of the administrative sort of welcoming type of content so that that doesn't interfere too much with our timeline. It's okay that people are still joining now. So welcome everybody. You're not missing anything. We're just getting things ready to go. And I'll kind of get started with our administrative introductions and our administrative announcements so that we can then get into the question and answer session with General Matthews. And in the next slide, I'm actually going to cover some of that type of administrative content, which may help people better understand how they can communicate with us throughout this session. So welcome everybody. You've come to the right place. We're having our question and answer session, part two with General Matthews. The first 5 minutes, or actually I'm starting a tiny bit early so that hopefully maybe even under the first 5 minutes will be these introductions and administrative announcements so that we dedicate as much time as possible to the actual content of this presentation. And then from approximately 12:05 to 12:55, give or take, we'll be answering your questions to General Matthews. So of course, make sure that you're aware of the question and answer module, which is enabled for this session. And of course, the chat functionality is enabled as well. You can send questions in both. It's probably easier if you use the question and answer module, which is found in that toolbar of the Zoom client. When you hover over it, you'll see a little Q&A and bubbles there, and you can put your questions there, and it should be enabled for anonymous questions as well. And so we'll be taking those throughout the sessions. If for some reason you're having a little bit of difficulty interacting with that Q&A functionality, then by all means, just feel free to use the chat. We want to make sure we get to your questions and give the general an opportunity to answer those things as well. So We'll be doing that from 12:05 to 12:55, and then we'll have our final comments and wrap up. As a reminder, it's my pleasure to welcome you. I'm Rob Valdez. I'm currently volunteering as president of ISACA South Florida, and it's a privilege to do so along with our co-host Lynn Cotton, who is a director at large for the chapter. We're very grateful to her for also dedicating her time and volunteering to make this happen, and to be here to help out and monitoring those types of questions and comments and chat as well. Of course, you have our chapter website on the right-hand side, isacasfl.org, and in the bottom right-hand, you have a little reminder to interact with the Q&A module. Technical issues, of course, can be sent in chat. We'll try and address those to the best we can, which is why we always say at the very beginning, we encourage you to use the Zoom client, that actual desktop application, for the best possible experience. If you do not have that, Chrome is typically considered to be the next best option in terms of functionality. So that should allow you to access that question and answer module. Either one should allow you to access the chat functionality. So either way, we should be able to get your questions, which, by the way, you can go ahead and start populating those questions into the session now, because in just a second, we'll be getting into that actual discussion with General Matthews. And so that kind of does it for the administrative announcement, but there's a couple of important things I want to mention as well as we get started, which I wanted to knock out quickly here. And that is that it is an honor and a privilege for ISACA South Florida to support community research, especially community research which aligns with our mission statement and our values. Our mission of helping South Florida see the power and potential of technology and building trust in those types of technology, and our values in things like leadership and integrity. And there is some research being done specifically in this area right now, studying the relationship between leadership styles and how they can support creating an information security compliance culture. And so we're very happy to be able to support this doctoral research that's being done. And so there is a link that is presented on the screen right now that you can go to, and we're going to put that in the chat as well. And there's a link that you can go to take a quick survey and participate in and support that research. And that will become part of the body of knowledge that's used in publishing this research. When you do so, if you want to be enrolled in a raffle that is being sponsored by ISACA South Florida to give away gift cards to potential entrants, then of course you can use ISACA SFL as part of your unique username when you fill out this quick survey. And then after creating that login and password, you'll see the informed consent. You need to consent that this is information being used for research. And then once you've read and agreed to that, you can click the button at the bottom of the page. The survey will begin. It should take you approximately 10 to 15 minutes. I actually already did the survey myself, and it took me less than 10 minutes in all sincerity. And it's probably because I have some pretty strong opinions about leadership being very important for creating an effective information security culture. So I would invite all of you to go ahead and do that, and we'll make sure to include that link as well for you again. And then now it gives me great pleasure to introduce and remind you of who our special guest is for today's conversation, General Matthews. And right now, General Matthews is the Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for Mandiant Security Validation. Formerly, this product was known as Verodin. It was purchased by Mandiant, and as many of you probably know, Mandiant has subsequently been acquired by FireEye, one of the largest and most effective information security organizations on the planet, right? Now, in addition to that, General Matthews has served in many very important leadership roles in the past, both at prior organizations, but then something that I think is very interesting to all of us is that he served as the Director of Cyber Operations and Chief Information Security Officer for the U.S. Air Force. So that's quite a perspective that we're really honored to have here today. And in that role, of course, overseeing extraordinary projects, budgets, securing our national defense, and leading a transformation of 64,000 person cyberspace, telecom, and information technology workforce. It's quite a perspective that we're able to have here today. So first of all, General Matthews, thank you very much for your service, and thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's great to see that my hairline hasn't changed that much in 6 years. Face is a little older. That's a pretty young looking guy there, but I can still claim that that's me.
Exactly. The important stuff, right? All right. So maybe what I'll do then is so that people can actually, they can change to, focus view if they want, is I'll stop sharing so that the emphasis is kind of on us, the speakers, and we can actually go ahead and kind of get into some of the questions and answers for this session. And so I'll make sure to remind everybody and invite you to go ahead and put your questions in the question and answer module, and then go ahead and put your questions in the chat as they arise. And since people sent some questions in advance, I'm going to actually get started with some of those questions that were already provided to us. So without beating around the bush, the SolarWinds hack and breach are pervasive and quite important, and to some degree, devastating. And I would actually appreciate very much if you would help contextualize this event, this incident, both from your perspective, from a national security and defense perspective, as well as, critically, you have a FireEye perspective and Mandiant perspective in this as well. So if you could kind of give us some perspective on that.
Yeah, thanks again, Rob, and Lynn for having me back today. And I truly want this to kind of be an open conversation. I have no prepared slides. This is all about, hey, what's of interest, to the ISACA community, and I am happy to be a South Floridian now. So, if we didn't think that COVID was bad enough in 2020, we ended the year now with probably the most significant attack by a foreign nation against our country. And our company was one of the victims, and we were actually the company that identified it first. And what had happened was that in stage one of the attack, what they did is they planted a backdoor into our network, via the SolarWinds platform. Okay, so again, this is comes back to supply chain. How do we handle supply chain, and how are we able to mitigate some of the problems that happen with that? But what made this particularly sinister was that in the second stage was then to use the backdoor to access domain credentials, such as user accounts and passphrases. And then the third stage, they were able to get token signing certificates to access Office 365, and likely looking for specific email accounts. And then the final stage for us was the theft of our red team tools. Now, we quickly responded to this. We quickly mitigated that anyone could actually use these tools against us, because we published on GitHub, here are all the tools, here's all the ATP. There were no 0 days involved in this. It was just really some of our open source techniques, but ones that we had modified based on the company's experience on doing incident response around the world. So if we compare that to the NSA, hack a number of years ago, there's no comparison. The NSA attack hack was far greater than what had happened here, not to minimize anything that had happened here. And so what we quickly figured out what was happening in our environment, because we use a credentialing service that allows individual employees to register new devices and then be able to get the credentialing from it. And so what had happened is that the U.S. government has claimed that this is Russia. We have not come to the final conclusion yet with our attribution, but we will, and we will perfectly state who it is, and when we have near 100% attribution against it. What they did is they used the back door to get in, and then once they got access to create their own credentials, they never used the SolarWinds back door again. They came in through the front door, and then since they had a specific user's account, then they self-registered a device, and then they got in the front door like a regular user. And it was through the threat hunting, we knew something was wrong based on VPN data. And so our threat hunting team, which are the same ones that go out and help customers on their IRs or do assessments, came back to the user and said, hey, did you register this device? And the person said, no, I never registered that device. And that's then what we were able to conclude. Hey, we actually have an intrusion. And then we started, putting all this together. Now, there are still some parts of the hack that haven't been revealed yet. I mean, every day that goes by, we publicly put out, hey, here's what we know about it and here's how it's happened. But since it's a criminal investigation, like most breaches, there's still some things that we can't do it. Now, on the second part of your question, Rob, about the national security implications, this is massive. And so if this wasn't a criminal hack, this was, in our view, espionage being created against the United States and significant private companies. So if we take all of SolarWinds customers, there are about 300,000 of them. If you think of it as a funnel, we get down that, hey, between March and October last year, about 18,000 of those 300 customers had downloaded the patch, and then of that number, maybe a few thousand had actually implemented the patch. And then when we get down to the bottom, our assessment was there's only about 50 customers that they are targets that they were actually after. Most of those, as we've known from the news, were federal government, and then key industry companies like FireEye, because we do out the Russians a lot on what they're doing. And so we were a target, and we believe what they were really looking for is, hey, how have we assessed their capabilities and what are we doing to help test against them and mitigate with our customers so they're not susceptible to those type of tactics and techniques. So it's massive. Third party, folks have come out, including the Senate, saying that this attack probably still would be ongoing if FireEye hadn't been so forthcoming and so quickly revealed everything and put out the mitigations. And we're not patting ourselves on the back, and we're not on the back because we're not making light of this. But I think, in a year or so, when folks go back and do the after lessons learned piece of it, I think they're going to find that we acted appropriately and quickly. And at the end of the day, we actually didn't have to report it because it didn't fall underneath the rules that are set by the SEC for publicly held companies. And it's because, our CEO is a practitioner. He speaks with credibility. And when he came out initially and said, hey, these are tactics and techniques I have never seen in the 25 years we've been in this business, that's a pretty powerful statement. So sorry, it's a long answer there, Rob, but you asked me two parts, and I thought it was, kind of important to kind of put some of those details there.
Yeah, well, it's understandable because it's actually not a small and not a simple event in nature, right? That we're talking about. And so just to kind of elicit a little bit of the detail and review a little bit of the detail of what you said, because we're getting a question about how was the attack detected. I want to reiterate my understanding, and maybe you can validate this, is that it was detected through your threat hunting team identifying anomalous activity through VPN connections, something that they wanted to check out.
That is correct. That's exactly how we found it. And so it's this, one of the things that I've, having been in commercial industry now for a number of years with a couple of different companies, I think the strongest thing is when you're supporting customers and they go, hey, are you using this technology or these techniques? It's far more powerful when you able to say yes. And everything that we have in our company, we use, and including other, third-party products. It's not just our own, but this The active threat hunting is absolutely critical for anybody to be able to detect that there's some anomalous behavior, because it truly is looking for a needle in a needle of haystacks, of that one that's just a little bit different. That's how proactive we are on it. And we look at mean time to detection, and I can't give you the exact timeline yet, but I will tell you that it was within weeks, right? And if we look at industry average, it's months before somebody texts us. So we really just, my hat's off to our IR people and the way that they do threat hunting on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And since there's so much involved in this story, if it's okay, I'm going to or unpack just a couple of the kind of perspectives and takeaways. And this is something that was actually kind of brought forward in advance of this session that someone wanted to ask, and it's related directly to your question. And it's that Stuxnet in the past, a cyber attack allegedly attributed to the United States, it is a display of U.S. cyber dominance and force. And since we're talking about sort of nation state level types of events, can you give us a little bit of a sense of your perspective of how the United States compares in terms of strength to other nation state actors and where we are there?
Yeah, so I'll first relay it to us versus the threat. So, I firmly maintain and believe that we are the best at this in the world. When we look at peer competitors, certainly Russia is at the top of the list. Not far behind that are the Chinese. Then we get the Iranians and the North Koreans at kind of after that. Not that others don't have capabilities, but those are generally the threats that we are always most worried about. Now, the thing with the Russians, they're exquisite in my view, and they are very quiet on the network. Look, no one else has found this. This was going on, for almost not quite a year, but about a year. But we were the ones who were able to find it when it got into our environment. The Chinese, on the other hand, tend to be a little bit louder, and they just spray everywhere on there, and they really do. I don't think care as much about getting detected on it. The Iranians, provide a good capability. Not either one of those. They're kind of somewhere in the middle about how they attack stuff. And then the North Koreans are all just about ransomware primarily to be able to get money, right? Because they're still on the banned list, and they have all these trade restrictions. So they're really trying to squeeze people for money out of ransomware, but that's how it comes together. Now, if we flip that around and say, okay, well, what about our allies, and how well are our allies prepared? The UK, really, really, really strong. The Australians, very, very, very strong. Canadians are coming up. The Germans are pretty good at a lot of these different areas, as well as some of our other allies. But those would probably be the ones that Israel, right? Not technically an ally, but an ally. They have very strong capability too. And for all of us, it's about capacity. And how do you generate enough capacity to be able to do it? Because 90% of what we're doing every single day is on defense, right? It's not the offensive side of it. You can grow enough offensive capability, in my view, over time. But on defense, that's every single day. And it's not just the security folks, it's the IT professionals, it's each individual person in their company or their organization is a frontline defender, right? So we as employees of our companies, we have a responsibility to make sure we're not clicking on stuff that we shouldn't be clicking on and things like that. So, and that my personal view, the only way out of any of this, because we can't throw enough resources. I think last year, Rob, I read there's a 300,000 person shortfall in cybersecurity, a 350% increase over the previous year. So this gets us now to, hey, we need to have automation to help augment what our people are doing, because we just can't hire enough people.
Yeah, there's absolutely. I can certainly appreciate that perspective, right? It'll be critical to use automation and to work smarter as opposed to just throwing resources at a bottomless pit.
Yep.
And you're touching on a few really key ideas here, and one of them was one of the questions also that came in, and that is that we talk a lot about cyber defense because it's so critical. But then, of course, there's a lot happening in terms of cyber offense, right? And that's both from a national perspective and presumably from a FireEye and Mandiant perspective as well, right? And so I would love to hear some of your thoughts in terms of offensive posture and what that looks like.
Okay. Um, there's been over the, probably last 6, 7, maybe 8 years, this notion from industry that they should have permission to hack back. Okay. I am firmly against that. What most of what we are seeing is espionage in addition to the cybercrime and stuff. Now, of course, the Chinese have stolen more intellectual property out of our country than any single nation over time, but primarily it's all about espionage and that kind of stuff. And if we're going to hack back, to me, that is what the government's responsibility is to do, right? Because really that starts getting pretty close to determining, hey, is this going to be an act of war or not act of war? Now, with all of that said, we are using the courts from private industry to be able to knock down servers in other countries. Microsoft has done a phenomenal job using the copyright of their software, going to the courts and getting permission to take down servers and data centers in other people's countries. But it's all well coordinated through the legal system, saying, hey, this is an infringement of our copyright of our software. It's never supposed to be intended to use this way. And we want to take it down because it's causing pain for our customers, whether it's financial or resources, whatever. And they've been given permission to do that. So even with SolarWinds, it's awesome, right? So we see all the articles, hey, Microsoft uses the Death Star, right, to go do that, which is awesome. So now they can, just wipe that stuff off when they see it through automation. By the way, a shameless plug here is it was really our red team guys that gave Microsoft, hey, here's exactly how the malware works. And when these triggers go off, this is what it goes and does, and can't do that. And so we gave it to them. So that's what allowed them to do it. The other thing that made it a little bit different too, because they're going, hey, why didn't NSA or the CIA detect that? Okay. Well, the primary reason is all the servers that the bad guy used were located within the United States. So that surveillance cannot be done by the National Security Agency or the NSA, despite what people think. I mean, I've been a part of many of those meetings and going to the FISA courts and getting permissions to be able to go do stuff, but flipping all that stuff around is just not possible. So that then falls to the FBI, Secret Service in some cases, and then of course they just don't have the capacity about it. So that's also that made this attack somewhat different. And we know that it was a nation state to be able to do it because they had to replicate every target's infrastructure within the US in order to be able to go do this. So it's really highly sophisticated, lots of resources, low and slow. But anyway, so from an offensive capability, I think we are postured well to be able to go do that. And what we try to do as a nation is work in what we call gray space. Okay, so blue space is the good guys, red space is the bad guys, but then you have this gray space in between, and that's where we try to do most of our interdiction, so that we're not attacking them on their soil and all that kind of stuff, but we're knocking down the infrastructure that they're using in other countries to go do that. And I'll remind our audience to look at David Sanger's book, The Perfect Weapon, and it talks about cyber, specifically mentions Stuxnet. To the person who that we can say that we were involved, because there was a 4-star general who actually got censored over saying that we got involved with one of our allies. So yeah, we have that capability, and I remain that we are the best at it in the world, but I think we are also more judicious about what it is we do and how we do it, because every time you do something like that, like a Stuxnet, you've now just burned those tools, right? You can't use them again, because now we have defensive capability to be able to detect if that's happening in our environment, as long as you have good cyber hygiene and their controls are set up that way.
Right. Wow. Interesting point. And you brought up something else that I want to kind of dig into a little bit. And I'll remind people as I ask this next question that please don't forget that you can use, and I see some coming in, don't forget to use the question and answer module to ask questions so that we can ask the general. And I want to dig in a little bit more into something that you were talking about, because when we talk about nation state actors and this sort of thing, the magnitude of the threat, it can seem overwhelming to governance, risk, compliance, security, and audit professionals, right, who are sitting in their chairs saying, what can I do? So can you talk to us a little bit about what organizations can do, and maybe even tell us a little bit about what FireEye actually does to defend itself and to resist these types of forces?
Yeah, I think the good news here is that there is a lot of good information now that got quickly put out there. So already in early December, we had put out what are the FireEye recommendations. So for detection, right, means you need to now have more hunting capability or opportunities to be able to see what's going on in your network. We, like most of the SolarWinds customers, we upgraded our platform to the latest release. I think it was 2020.2.1 and some other on there. On our network, we isolated our traffic specifically on the Orion platform, right? So it's got segmented off, so now we can pay more attention to it. We did password change. We also, remember I mentioned earlier that I could self-credential a new device. We've taken that capability away now, so that you can't do it that way. And I would go through and look at all the different network and device configurations that somebody might have, and that's available out on our website. From Microsoft, also released something on the exact same day, and what they had recommended is that you immediately initiate your AV and EDR, that your antivirus and endpoint go out to do that. They even put out, hey, you might want to considering disabling SolarWinds, blocking command and control IOCs, looking at your identity and privileged access considerations, all the normal things that we would do in a disaster recovery. DHS put out also on the same day an emergency directive that talked about forensic analysis and how you might want to go about it. The Singapore CERT also put out one on how to disconnect or power down those products, how to review logs for suspicious activities, reset credentials, which is what we did. The other interesting thing here about this particular breach is we went through and we reset our credentials 3 times globally. And because one of the things that we found was that the first reset didn't quite take or get to every single device. So we ended up doing it 3 times in the middle of November. That's how I knew, because I wasn't part of the breach response. That's how I knew what we were dealing with, something internally, but I just couldn't say, since I was part of it. But I knew exactly what was happening because as the Air Force CISO, we had to do this a number of times ourselves. The National Cyber Security Center in the UK also has some great things out there. You have to look for teardrop. And again, they went over, hey, let's look at the credentialing again. NSA had a number of ways to harden Azure authentication and authorization. So I think there's just a lot of good materials that come out now on exactly what's happening. But I remain that if it wasn't for the threat hunting or having the people being very dedicated at what they're doing in their job, we probably still wouldn't know that this was coming on. And so that comes back to the human element of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that human element, you already kind of touched on a certain point about the limitation of resources and the number of requisitions, the amount of talent and skilled workforce that we actually need. There's a question coming in kind of relating to this, and that is, do these types, in your perspective, do these types of cyber events bring additional demand for cybersecurity professionals, or are we still so constrained by budgetary demands from COVID and other things that it's not going to have that kind of impact? How do you see that?
Well, It's going to be a little of both. So as I mentioned, if we just take a look at this particular attack, we look at the funnel, there's probably, most of them were federal agencies and a handful of commercial companies like ourselves. But what I think this is kind of a wake up call for is that, hey, starting to take a look at our supply chain and, how do we start holding companies, like SolarWinds accountable for their patches, and that their patches are exactly the code that they designed and put in it. But what we also found out from this, there's two other smaller companies that provide SecDevOps services, and they were using those services for their folks. And that's actually how we think they got in, was not directly through SolarWinds, but through these other suppliers that helped them do SecDevOps. And then that got in there. Wow. I was meeting with a large company a couple of weeks ago, and the CEO just said, specific, Earl, what can we do? We have 70 major applications out there. How are we supposed to be able to go do all this? And I said, you're not going to be able to do that, right? You can't just take every single one. So it gets back, and I said, look, it comes back to starting with the most important thing. Hey, how are you doing identity and access management? Number one thing. What's the role for people to be able to play to access things, right? I shouldn't be able to access all 70 applications. I told him, I said, you as the CEO shouldn't be able to access all 70 applications. You have no reason to do it as the CEO. But I said, I bet your credentials allow you to do that, right? And so this role-based piece becomes very, very important. And then I told him it's just all about, hey, how quickly can you detect and then mitigate what's going on, right? And that's what it's all about, is that speed. And I come back, that in order to do that, you have to have, very good services being provided to you for threat hunting. You have to have your own threat hunting, and you have to have some automation, capability in there just to be able to detect that, hey, if we have some anomalies going on, we need to go focus on it. Because at first, when it was broached that, hey, we have been penetrated, we think it's a supply chain hack, most people said, no, that can't be right. Right? And it turned out that was exactly what it was. All right. So.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Sometimes.
To finish on there, then on those resources, right? So that's where we have to start looking at. Hey, if I can start knocking down my cyber hygiene problem, and I can take one or two more of those resources and put them on threat hunting, right? Re-roll them, reskill them, or bring in new people who have those skills. That's really what I think we'll see some of the changes. But this isn't one of those type of breaches where we see a wholesale, change of, hey, how we have to go do business. I don't see that just out of this breach.
Yeah, and it's an especially relevant topic while we're talking about resources and budgetary constraints. I know you and I have spent some time before discussing the importance of having an approach of establishing business cases for your for your security stack, and really kind of an intelligent and proactive approach to addressing the business case for these sorts of things. So how can we go about enhancing our ability to do that? Decide, hey, which tools are best in place? Where can we put the value when we're dealing with these types of budgetary constraints in a global pandemic and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, it all comes back to risk, understanding what your crown jewels are that are on your network, and then ensuring that those crown jewels are well protected, right? And you have to follow the normal methodology that we use to be able to start going, okay, we all just have way too many tools. And so you have to figure out how to rationalize the tools that you have, because what we have done is we've overcomplicated the security stack. And I'm guilty of this as anyone else. When I was a CISO, as I was willing to put yet another technology into the stack, but I wasn't willing to take a technology out of the stack because I didn't know what was going to happen after I had it in the stack. And we've got to use automation to do the testing, to give me concrete data, to be, as I talked about, I think in the last talk, to be able to determine, not without emotion, without subject matter expertise, going, oh, I love Palo Alto over Checkpoint, and here's why, because I have past history. It's like, no, none of that matters. What matters is the data. How well do you have that firewall, either one of them, configured, and is it giving you the return on investment that you need? So we've worked with a number of customers who on their firewalls, and they're only using 25% of the capability of a $100,000 firewall. That's not very good, right? You want that return on investment to be in the mid 70s or higher. Now, it's probably never going to be 100% unless that's the only device that you have in your stack. You know, that you might, we've seen this at a university before for their student network. They just have a next gen firewall and then that's it. So you want to tune that thing as best as you can, because you know, it's $100,000, you're only getting 24% out of it. That's not a very good return on investment, is it? On there, and your risk posture has changed too on there. So that's how I have always gone about, you know, trying to prioritize is, you know, just what are the most important things to my organization or my business? What makes them run? And what I did and I'll just, as a reminder to the audience, so when I was the CIO at U.S. Transportation Command and I come in and I go, okay, we got way too many applications and it's too complicated architecture. So I went to the COO equivalent and I said, hey, here are all the business applications we use to move logistics globally around the world and that we interface with FedEx, UPS, you know, everybody, right? All the airlines. I said, I need you to prioritize these from 1 to N and tell me which ones are the most important. And I didn't bring it up from a cybersecurity standpoint. I said, look, if we have a catastrophic outage, I only have enough resources to bring back stuff online little by little. So which are the most important? Well, what I found out from that, what they sent me back versus what we were spending money on defending was not equal. We were spending more money on lower types of priority applications than we were on the mission essential ones. And so that led to a whole different discussion, backup systems, how we did backup, disaster recovery, how we did tabletop exercises, which ones took the, so there's a, I'm sorry to say it's just back to the normal stuff we know as IT professionals, right? Go back to the basics and let's go figure it out. But we have to hold the line of businesses accountable for prioritizing. Because I told them, I go, look, I don't know which ones are the most important to you. I mean, I think I did because that's part of the job of the CIO is know where all the data is moving to. But at the same time, it's not my decision to say this is more important than that. My job is to tell you, okay, if this is the most important to you, here's what we need to do from a security perspective in order to make that mission survivable.
Yeah, it's a fantastic message to send at a time when maybe a lot of people are out there reviewing, enhancing, and revisiting business continuity types of programs.
Yeah,
right?
and that's I think if anything's coming out of SolarWinds, it's about, okay, we really need to take a hard look at our incident response plan. When was the last time that we actually briefed leadership on how this worked? When was the last time that we actually exercised it one time? And then even for us, it was like, hey, how the lawyers are the most important people you got to go talk to when this happens, and media, right? Your public relations folks on, hey, how do we get out of this? And if you wait till the last minute to do that, it's a disaster, right? And how many breaches have we seen from companies that are just total disaster after that, right? And to me, it's just, hey, look, I think the earlier that you can reasonably publicly disclose whether you're required to or not, the better off you are. And our stock took a 10% hit, but then it went up 50-something% after it was revealed that, holy moly, these are the only people that could identify it. They identified it and they released it fast, right? Kind of stuff. But because we're all going to take a ding at the beginning because nobody knows what's happening. Right?
Yeah,
I remember all the news. I remember all the news reports. Right? Oh, if FireEye can get hacked, anybody can hack. Well, that's what our CEO and the rest of us have always said. It's not a matter of if, a when. It's a matter if. It's a matter of when.
Right? Absolutely. And since you were bringing up the topic of increased automation, there's a question that's come in about what kind of perspectives you might have regarding artificial intelligence being a powerful tool for detecting attacks.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And because here's why. There are a lot of companies out there that do red teaming assessments, can provide automated pen testing, can provide breach and attack, simulation testing, right? Map it against the MITRE ATT&CK framework and so forth. I'm going to give it another shameless plug here. We are the only company that is actually using the real binaries. And why I laid that out is because as we start inducing more and more machine learning and other artificial intelligence techniques into the security stack, if you're not using the real binaries and you're using a neutered form or reverse engineered form, simulated form, your artificial intelligence is learning the wrong behaviors, right? That's why this is so critical about how do you safely use the real stuff to test in my production environment, because that's the only one that counts, in a very safe manner so that I can get the data to map it back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework or my NIST framework or my HIPAA framework, whatever my compliance or regulatory is. What you really want to know is, hey, the data, and here's actually how my controls are working and how those things tie back to each other and how they're, so the auditor can go, okay, so this is the attack and here's the attack, type of attack, and here's the tactic and technique, and here's the controls that you decided to use for PCI. I see the complete mapping, and here's the result, right? And the next time the audit comes, I either want to see that exact same result because it was good, or I want to know if it's been changed. And through automation, we can do that, faster and on a more repetitive time. Because what I always suffered as a professional running my networks in the Air Force, and we would have these inspections come in, the environment has changed dramatically, not just from day to day, but over a period of 6 or 7 months in between inspection cycles. And what I try to get my people is keep that bathtub as low as possible. But what ends up happening, your bathtub gets really deep because you don't get the resources to upgrade to the next version of software. You don't get to buy the next appliance, or you're at end of life, or you go, hey, can we really squeeze one more year out of this firewall before we go to the next one? Those are all risk decisions, right? Many times driven by budget. But our job as professionals is to say, okay, here's what it's going to do. And, it's going to drive that capability. And, when I left as Air Force CISO, we still had NT boxes, right?
Right.
It's just a fact of life. And so how you segment those off and understand the risk and secure them to the best you can so that it can't affect the rest of the network. So that's how it has to be done. I hope I answered the person's question.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very, very informative answer. So thank you for that. And we're getting additional questions coming in as well.
Beautiful.
Especially regarding your point on multiple technologies being used in the security stack and kind of effectively creating silos. Do you see more of a need for security leaders, CISO equivalents, to provide strategy and vision, or for security analysts and engineers to provide hands-on work like protection or remediation, etc.?
And the answer is yes, both of those. So this ties back to the doctoral questionnaire that was given out, because I answered it too. And one of the questions that was in there is that, should the CISO be a transformational leader? Should they be status quo, laissez-faire? I'll use bleeding edge as for whatever the next category over. And I would say that yes, you have to be a transformational leader if you're in the security business. And there are two primary reasons for that. One is that there will always be digital transformation, right? Most of us are going through the cloud, and cloud has been going on for more than 10 years, but it's still digital transformation. And because of COVID, a lot of companies sped it up by 3 to 5 years. That's great. But we also have to be paying attention to, how do we start securing this stuff as a transformational leader? You can't wait until you start implementing cloud to understand how do cloud controls work. What's the difference between cloud controls and terrestrial ones? And the number one issue is you don't have the same visibility in cloud as you have on your terrestrial network, because we don't have the same types of appliances up there. But you always have to kind of stay a little bit ahead of, hey, where do we need to be going next? And I'm sorry, to keep coming back to this, but in the military, it was about where can we start inducing more and more automation to take away the burden that our people have to do. And that's why we are starting to see CISOs now start looking for, hey, I really want an integrated platform. I don't want people to keep coming in here and talking to me about point solutions. I want someone here to talk to me about, how can I create a holistic security strategy that maps me out to be able to get to automation in all the places that I can automate, right? And not all of it is, just like not everything should be moved to the cloud. And so I think the CISO and the CIO's job is to provide that transformational type leadership. And it's hard, but that's also why IT and cybersecurity all my life because it's never boring, right? It's always changing.
You're not going to run out of problems to solve, right?
Never. I run out of money before I run out of problems.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, to that point, there's another question that's coming in. And this person is saying they find that they're less able to convince senior management that the risk is bright red or high when they understand better the business risk of not delivering against operational plans versus the probability component. So what advice does the general have for someone like you in audit, someone who's trying to communicate to management, the seriousness and severity of the risk, uh, relating, factoring in these kinds of considerations, probability, impact, that sort of
Okay,
thing.
so this is the critical part of the discussion. So number one, we're not discussing cyber risk. We are talking about risk that is induced by cyber. And all of that equals financial risk. Okay, this is really, really key here. We're not talking about cyber risk. We're talking about, right, risk induced by cyber. Now, what we have to do is we need to talk to them in the same language that they understand. They understand HR risk. They understand financial risk. They understand broader security risk, right? Physical security risk, all those kind of things. But for all those things, we have well-defined metrics that are generating data that they have grown up over their careers that they understand very well, right? They can show up those metrics, they can go through them just like that. So what we haven't been doing, we haven't been managing cybersecurity through data. And what I'm suggesting here is that through the right types of testing, you can now correlate back to the threats that are important to you. So if you're in the financial business, those aren't the same threats that are going after critical infrastructure. Okay, it's not the same threats necessarily going after the governments, right? So you want to know what is the most current threats that are happening now, and how can I assess myself on a continual basis about how well I'm doing against those risks. Then put those into standardized metrics. And if you have a risk officer in your organization, I would be partnering with the risk officer and say, hey, how are you quantifying risk for the rest of the organization? We shouldn't come in differently and assess ourselves a different way, because the senior leadership, right? And look at myself in the mirror, right? I don't want to have to change my brain. Oh, it's the cyber guys now. I need to think about this differently. No, I want to think about risk holistically, and that's just a component. So we're still on a journey with that, but now we can actually produce the quantifiable data about how my controls are working. As I mentioned earlier, map it to the threat framework from MITRE, take current threat intelligence. Here are the ATP groups or financial groups that are important to me and how they attack me, and be able to produce those metrics back to the NIST controls or my audit framework and say, this is how well we're doing. That can all be done today. So that's where we have to move to be able to start showing folks, hey, we want to start government, because up until now, we assume the vendor's product does what it wants. We assume that we have it deployed and configured correctly. We assume our people know what to do with the data when it comes out of it. And we assume that we're coordinating the changes in the environment well, right? And I tell you, I ran an iron hot configuration control board when I was responsible for the Air Force's global satellite network. And even then, I got surprised every now and then that someone made a change when we had a total network freeze because we're going to launch something out of Cape Canaveral. No changes, but someone invariably, decided to make it, even though we had meetings all the way up to it. Right? Stuff happens. It just happens.
Even at that level, right?
Even at that level. So just a funny story. So my group was part of the no-go on every single space launch, okay? Because we provided the sensors globally. So when they went out of Cape Canaveral, so we could track the telemetry of the rockets, right? In case anything went wrong, all that kind of stuff. Well, we lost the connection. It came down to the last minute of the no-go, right? Talk about pucker factor, okay? I'm going, here I am, I'm gonna stop a $500 million launch because we can't connect two circuits together, right?
No pressure.
No, well, pressure wasn't on me, the pressure was on the poor technicians, down, trying to figure all this stuff out. Oh my gosh. But luckily, by the grace of God, we were there. I'd rather be lucky than good any day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, what a powerful message that that it's at the end of the day, it's always has been financial risk that we're talking about, right? And especially coming out of 2020 when we've kind of seen, unfortunately, the nonstop pervasion of the threat of ransomware coming out and presenting this type of risk and not letting up. And since we're all, becoming even more dependent on remote workforce and these types of capabilities, bad actors exploiting that. What are some of your perspectives regarding the threat of ransomware as we're facing this?
Yeah, it's not going to go away anytime soon. Matter of fact, I can't remember the exact number, $150 million, I think they got last year through ransomware, the cyber criminals. And so they're just going to continue to go at it until they're stopped. And it's unfortunate because ransomware is so easily detected in your environment through, the tools that you have, but also through company culture, employee education. I'm tired of hearing people say, hey, employees are our weakest link. No, they're not. They're the strongest link we have. Right? They're the most important resource that we have in any organization. So stop referring to them as the weakest link. We maybe haven't done a very good job on educating our people on things. And so there was an interesting thing, Rob, that came out during COVID. So Stanford University, 2 or 3 times a week, they do the phishing exercises. And across Stanford, things were pretty good. But then COVID hit, and everybody had a thirst for knowledge about COVID that their phishing things started to spike significantly, not because people didn't know, they just that they shouldn't click on links. It's like, this is something that's really important to me, right? So I and my family, I want to learn more. So they were more willing to go click on those things and put it at risk. So I actually just got an email yesterday that came across our spear phishing campaign and said, hey, here is the 2021 employee handbook. Would love for you to be able to go load that down and give us your feedback on it, right? And I looked at the thing and said, fire HR, Bo, that just doesn't seem right to me, right? So we have a little at our top of our email report spear phishing. So I did it, and then boom, came back. Oh, congratulations! This is one of our spear phishing things, right? But it's important to me, right? It's the new fiscal year. I need to know my employee, stuff. But so that's the psychology of stuff that we have to go in. I don't know if I tattled on myself last time either in this regard, but I always think, lessons are important, especially your own stories. So this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I bank with the USAA Bank, which is, started by military officers a long time ago. And the bad guys, when I was still in uniform, were targeting the bank because of they were trying to get the generals and high-ranking folks' information and kind of stuff. So they had put in some extra security measures, and so they keep improving it as we go along. Well, a few years ago, I got a letter in the mail from USAA and said, hey, look, we're seeing increasing activity targeting senior officers, whether active duty or retired. Please log on. There's some other controls things, right? I go, whatever. So I put it down. Well, so I'm at work and I got an email from USAA saying, hey, you sent your letter 30 days ago and you haven't done this kind of stuff. You better go do it. So I have 2 monitors set up, right? So I'm working on something. I come over here, I log, I click the link, I start logging in. Then they start asking me all these questions. I'm going, why would they be asking me these questions? Right? This doesn't make sense. So immediately then I went up and looked at the URL, right? Well, that's not them, right? But so even me, right? I just got distracted because I was trying to do multitasking, right? And this is sometimes where we get in trouble. So it wasn't, the fact that Earl Matthews doesn't know anything. Earl Matthews was trying to do 2 things at one time and, he almost got burned.
Yeah.
Right. So even it could happen to someone like me. So anyway, I tattle on myself again.
No, it's a humbling narrative, right? That certainly if you can be duped, then all of us are legitimately at risk.
The thing is, how did the bad guys even know I got a letter?
Yeah,
right? That's the thing. So they had to be inside USAA somewhere to know that these letters went out to be. I mean, because you tie those 2 things together, how could they know that?
Right.
right? And this gets back into the whole reconnaissance stage. These guys are really good now. And that's why, so what's happening on ransomware? So back to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So if your organization has been hit by ransomware once, you are 90% likely to get hit by ransomware again, especially if you paid. And they know exactly now how much money to ask for because they're doing their due diligence to know, hey, how much money they think you're willing to be able to pay based on your insurance. I mean, these guys are awesome about what it is that they do, and they're making a lot of money. Wow. So, and I know Florida, especially, right? A lot of the counties and city government were hit hard with ransomware, a year or so ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, it continues to be a devastating attack in 2020 and in 2021. And as actually some thanks are coming in, I want to get your perspectives on kind of the outlook, maybe going forward. Even like in 2021, how do you perceive that threat landscape? And if it's part of your mental construct, then also even perhaps beyond 2021, what are some of your thoughts that you're thinking about the threat landscape going forward?
Yeah, so we've only got a couple of minutes to go here, Rod, so I want to be sensitive. So one, ransomware will stay at the top. Two, we'll start seeing ransomware as a service to being able to be provided. So they're going to go after a lot more customers than they ever had before. Three, if you're in critical infrastructure, we're going to see more attacks against critical infrastructure using ransomware. That my primary concern there is that for the most part, most operational technology, especially ICS SCADA systems, use proprietary systems. As they modernize, they're going to start buying more off-the-shelf IT systems. And so that means they need less specialization and they can apply all the techniques they're using for regular IT against critical control infrastructure. So we've really got to be careful there. Cloud visibility needs to increase. How are you securing the cloud? How are you, looking from one container to another container? What's the visibility? Because a lot of the cloud providers are not giving you all the data that you would have on your terrestrial network from a logging standpoint. Sometimes you can get it, you have to pay more. But in that particular case, I come back to identity and access management because they're just the provider. They're not determining who has access to the cloud, the applications. You are as the organization. If there's a breach, it's not their responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's your data. And I think a lot of times we just kind of go, oh, I'm going to outsource it now. And I'm going to go, no, that's not the case. Got a great Sweden story, talk about that, but I don't have time to talk about it. And then I see automation is absolutely essential here. And we're going to start seeing that take more place to help augment our people, especially around being able to review logs faster through machine learning and be able to determine, hey, these are types of events, kind of stuff. 5G, significant. Where we're headed with 5G and the kind of the vulnerabilities about 5G and the success about it. So a lot more to talk about if I get the opportunity to come back for a three-peat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there's 5 things right there that I want to dive into. I want to be sensitive to people's schedules, and as a matter of fact, we're even now receiving were in my mind some fantastic questions.
Sorry.
So
that's the training they gave us in the military with media. Leave them a hook, make them come back for more.
Leave them wanting more. Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much. You've been so extraordinarily gracious with your time. And once again, it's a real privilege and an honor to be able to discuss these critical topics with you. So, on behalf of all of ISACA South Florida, thank you for coming and discussing these items with us. And then to our membership and our community and our guests and our associates and our affiliates and anyone else who's interested, who's out there, please be mindful of upcoming chapter events that we're very excited about. And that is, of course, we're going through our administrative calendar year, just like every other year. We're having board nomination forms become available. So, maybe you too can be motivated and encouraged to serve as part of ISACA South Florida. And then we're very excited for the reimagination of our annual WOW conference, which obviously is taking quite a different form this year instead of our normal fantastic full day conference where we get to see each other and something that I really look forward to. I'm this time looking forward to a different type of experience, which is a week of events. It's 5 sort of webinars. 4 of those are lunch and learns, and then there's an event that's in partnership with SIM, Society for Information Management of South Florida. That'll be the week of February 15th through 19th. Registration is already open there, so please go ahead and it's free. Go ahead and take advantage of the learning opportunity. And then, as you can see, we have additional educational events planned already for March, a cloud security webinar, COVID fundamentals webinar that we're very excited about. And then be looking out for additional events coming between now and then in our part of our administrative schedule. As always, you can reach out to us at ISACA South Florida, isacasfl.org. You can contact any of us directly via email, and stay safe. Have a great day out there. Thank you very much, General Matthews, for spending this time with us. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thanks very much, and my pleasure, and I look forward to being part of the organization.
Excellent. All right. We
All right.
do too. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.